speak about those education programs, at what age should we be teaching our children about debt and credit?
Well, I certainly don't think that there's a limit on teaching your children about money. And I mean, they're exposed to that from a very, very early age. I mean, when you consider the access that children have to the internet, to, to television, they're just being pummeled all the time. And most of the things are, at some point or other, related back to money. Whether they want to buy, a fast food takeaway meal, whether they want to buy the latest trendy item of clothing. So I really think that there has to be a massive opportunity in the market for somebody to develop an educational program that basically works from early school age, right through to tertiary education, that maybe could even be competitive, that helps them learn, that if you got 100 Rand pocket money a month, the way you spend that, or the way you invest it, or the way you use it or leverage it, and they may even include some aspect that they are able to borrow, but what do they do with the money that they've borrowed, and how do they help that grow? And you could make it, as I say, like a competitive sort of interactive game that could even be online.
That sounds actually a little bit fun.
Yeah, and I think it would help, it certainly would help people understand the reality of what happens around debt.
Now, this is a way to teach young children who are growing up how to handle money and how to deal with money. But how do we teach the adults? Because these are the ones who are in debt, the people we're speaking now. How do we teach them in order to organize their, I guess, financial ways for the rest of their life?
I think it is just also about awareness, and I think that's across the board. So I think making, every party in the credit granting, in the credit selection product process, aware of the fact that there is this lack of education, and making tools available across different channels. So whether those be budgeting tools, asking those kind of questions. I mean, you apply for credit, you have to fill in an affordability assessment. It's quite difficult to do that if you haven't got a documented budget.
Right.
Because some people don't ever write those numbers down. So how do you actually, so maybe the thing is to say, well, yes, we might take the numbers from you and we write them down, but what about if you have to actually complete the form and submit it to us, and we get more detail from you that way, just so that you can see that there has been some sort of thought process in actually writing, down what your specific budget numbers are.
Is it the credit providers, is it up to the credit provider to provide this kind of education for their customers?
No, I think there's a far broader. I think that the industry at large. I mean, you can't remove credit from an economy. Certainly not an economy like South Africa. I mean, we thrive on having that access to credit, particularly where we've got such a large section of the population that are in the informal sort of entrepreneurial, kind of sole proprietorship type business. They're using their personal credit to actually fund a small business, which is often supporting families. So, you can't remove that credit completely out of the equation. So I think everybody that's involved in the credit industry, right down to ourselves from the debt collection side, has an onus and a responsibility to try and educate the consumer and make sure that they're aware of where they are, and to try and help them get out of the trap.
I think a lot of people, when they hear about credit and how in debt South Africans are, they might attribute it to South Africans just not being paid enough. They're just not making enough money to support the cost of living in the various different cities around South Africa. Do you think that's the case?
Well, not when you compare the cost of living to Europe and some of the other first world, maybe it's the wrong comparison, but other first world countries. If you look at how cheap, relatively speaking, South Africa is to live in, I think it is that we've just advanced to a far more kind of demand for immediate satisfaction. That savings mentality that was there 4 generations ago or 5 generations ago is gone. And you hear of young couples getting married and they've got every single appliance in their home from the day they got married. Now, 2 or 3 generations ago, that wasn't the case. People would get together, get married, and then save for each appliance as they could afford it. And there was no such thing as borrowing or being in debt.